I've long said that America leads not only by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. And I'm proud to put forward this incredible team that will lead by example.
Presumptive President-Elect Joe Biden introduces his top cabinet picks, and it includes several women and a Latino. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. Three weeks after the election, Joe Biden announces his top choices for key government positions as he prepares to become the 46th U.S. president. On Monday, a key government agency acknowledged Biden as the apparent winner of the U.S. presidential election, giving his team access to government resources and funding. U.S. President Donald Trump has still not conceded the election. The move comes at a critical time for the United States, with COVID-19 cases skyrocketing out of control. To date, more than 259,000 Americans have died, with cases topping 12 million people. CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King joins us now. Nathan, let's talk about what's been going on at the White House. President Trump made a few appearances there on Tuesday. What did he have to say?
Yeah, just as the Biden transition team were quietly turning on the computers just a few blocks from here at their transition headquarters, we had some very public appearances from the president. First of all, I mean, you know, it's an annual event here where just before Thanksgiving, the president pardons 2 turkeys, corn and cob. And unfortunately, as he's the outgoing president, you know, obviously metaphors abound between turkeys and ducks, lame ones, which is the term unfortunately given to presidents who are running out of time in office. So obviously there's turducken references, etc., etc. And then maybe one of the most bizarre appearances beforehand in the briefing room behind me that we've seen for the president, perhaps slightly less bizarre than when he talked about injecting bleach and putting lights inside your body, was a celebration of the Dow Jones Industrial Average reaching 30,000 points for the first time. Let's take a listen.
That's a sacred number, 30,000. Nobody thought they'd ever see it. That's the 9th time since the beginning of 2020. And it's the 48th time that we've broken records during the Trump administration. And I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that work so hard. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the people of our country, because there are no people like you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, he took no questions, and the number that he focused on, the Dow, obviously, you know, that's not bad if you own stocks, but the number that everyone's been focusing on is the 12.5 million cases of COVID and, what, nearly 260,000 deaths, Anna?
Nathan, President Trump says he's not conceding. So what are his next steps? I mean, does he have any legal options left?
In a short answer, no. I mean, essentially, the states that he tried to overturn, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, hang on, I'm trying to remember the others, Arizona, have essentially certified or are going through recounts that he's paying for that won't change the results, even in the wildest dreams of overturning a state. Joe Biden got 306 electoral college votes, the exact same number that Trump got back in 2016, which he called a landslide, the biggest win ever, et cetera, et cetera. So no, and there's no, the thing is, a lot of these courts have just been dismissing these cases out of hand. Very little room for appeal up to the different echelons of the federal government all the way to the Supreme Court. I can imagine the 9 justices of the Supreme Court very relieved at the moment. So they have essentially run out of steam. And you saw that from the president, although he hasn't conceded in a normal way by picking up the phone and congratulating Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, he did give his okay for staff to start working with the Biden transition team after that sign-off by the General Services Administration for buildings and stuff. So a lot of people think that's basically as conceding as he's going to get. We'll wait and see. But you could tell today, especially with his bizarre appearance for just 1 minute talking about the stock market, that he does feel a little bit like the attention is moving away from him at this White House to the occupant who's going to be here from January 20th.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's
Appreciate
Nathan
it.
King reporting from the White House. Well, for more now on the presidential transition and COVID-19, let's bring in our Washington, D.C. panel. Kate Telenko is the founder and CEO of Corvus Health, a global health firm. Katie Barlow is a lawyer and the host of Words Matter podcast. Adolfo Franco is an attorney and a Republican strategist, and Douglas Sloan is the principal and senior political analyst with National Capital Strategy Group. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. And Douglas Sloan, let me start with you. Joe Biden, as we've just heard, has announced some of his picks for his cabinet. At this stage, it's mainly people on foreign policy and, of course, on national security. Most, if not all, are alumni of the Obama administration. Here's Biden talking. Let's listen.
It's a team that will keep our country and our people safe and secure. And it's a team that reflects the fact that America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table, ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies, ready to stand up for our values.
Now, Douglas, not everyone is happy with the vice president's initial picks. Progressives in the Democratic Party are clearly upset at the initial choices. And some commentators have actually described the team that we know so far as the third Obama term. What do you make of it?
Well, it's a little early on to be lobbing this criticism and to have these inter-party squabbles. Biden hasn't even taken office yet. This is just the first wave of many appointments that we're going to see coming forward. And I just think it's a little early to be involved with lobbying criticisms at the incoming administration. We see a lot of experience coming forward. Janet Yellen, Linda Greenfield as ambassador to the UN, and Janet Yellen leading the leading the Treasury. And we also have a team that will be ready to go on day one. We have a team with a lot of experience, and it's something that we should be looking forward to. I think we're sending a signal to the world that America is going to be prepared and ready to move forward on day one with the Biden administration.
Adolfo Franco, let's talk about President Donald Trump. He's now told his administration to cooperate with the Biden transition team. The president has so far lost his legal challenges, but so far he's also not conceded the election. Look, admittedly, there's no legal requirement for him to concede the election, but why not concede in the interests of a smooth transition?
Well, there's a difference, and I've been on with Douglas before. He's a great guest to have. There's a difference between a concession when you feel the election has not been fair, and that's his belief, and that the election, for a lot of reasons, was irregular, and there have been irregularities, and there's a difference between that and accepting the result. And I draw the analogy, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, when Supreme Court cases come down and they're precedent-setting, people accept them, but they don't agree with them. So I think the president will accept the result, and it certainly looks like it's moving in the direction every day that Joe Biden will become the next president of the United States. But he's not the president-elect yet. He has not been certified. And even when that happens, I think the president will maintain that he will accept the process, he will accept the decisions, but he will not agree with them. He will maintain that the election's irregularities were fundamental, that the election was unfair, particularly in 2 or 3 key states. And even when this plays out, however it plays out, I think that will be his position. I don't think the president will concede in the traditional sense that we're thinking of, because he doesn't feel he really lost the election. That is his fundamental belief. He really does believe that sincerely.
But Adolfo, when you talk about irregularities, I mean, a lot of this has already been litigated. There's been quite extensive scrutiny of some of the disputes that the president has opened up. It's been found that there was no fraud, that this was a fair election, it was free and fair. So what irregularities are there?
Well, I don't know if the arbiters are the media and pundits and others. The arbiters are actually the courts, and that has not fully played out, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania. That is very much a pending issue as to whether the election laws could have been changed by the executive and by the Supreme Court of that state, which is a partisan Supreme Court. It's an elected court, majority Democrat. Or the Supreme Court certainly signaled a very different view about the authorities of, it's a constitutional question, of the legislature. That is a fundamental question that I think will be precedent-setting moving forward. So that is an irregularity to call that. Of course, the mail-in ballots, the universal voting, the last-minute changes in states like Nevada, the dispensing of second signatures in Georgia, these are irregularities. And there are affidavits that say they're fraud. Whether they come to the level of changing the election result is a different story. But the president has maintained, and his team has maintained throughout, that these are not insignificant issues, and they will certainly affect future elections if they're not addressed.
Katie Barlow, what is your view on where the country stands right now? I mean, all states must certify their respective election results by December 14th, and under the U.S. system, that's when the Electoral College meets and formally actually elects the president. Up to now, in past elections, this has been a mere formality, but could we see challenges right up to that date?
Well, for a while there were rumors of challenges, but I think those have been sufficiently tamped down from actually the individual states themselves. It's important to understand what happens on December 14th is each of the states, their state legislatures, appoint electors to vote on behalf of that state's popular vote. And on December 14th, all of those electors will come together and elect the Vice President and the President of the United States. It's laid out in our founding document in the Constitution. And what has been rumored and what individuals like Rudy Giuliani and some Trump supporters are suggesting is to convince some GOP-led state legislatures to change the way that their state voted in the popular vote via appointment of loyal electors, electors that will vote for the president rather than the way their state voted Joe Biden. But in fact, this week, GOP legislature leaders in Michigan met with the president. Right after that meeting at the White House, they said, look, we're going to follow the will of the people in our state in the popular vote. The same has been true in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin. All of these GOP state legislatures saying that they will follow the will of the people in their state, which was to vote for Joe Biden in the Electoral College representation, which will take place on December 14th. So I think, again, it will be a formality. And again, we will see that the Electoral College will vote for Joe Biden.
Okay, let's bring in Kate Telenko into this conversation. Kate, of course, all this is happening while COVID numbers continue to escalate in the country, across the country. One doctor estimates that we could soon have up to 2,000 deaths per day from COVID. In fact, on Wednesday, there were 180,000 new cases, and that's just on one day alone. What's behind this new spike?
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of it's just fatigue, that people are getting tired of having to social distance, tired of having to wear masks, tired of not going to sports events. And that's where the action of governors now is really going to matter, that governors lead by example, that they wear masks publicly, that they institute statewide mask mandates, because not all states have that yet. I think, unfortunately, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's are going to be super spreader events. And in many cases, I think a lot of the outbreaks, a lot of the epidemic won't die down until we get to the point where nearly every American has either had a loved one, a colleague, or a friend either severely sickened or die from COVID. And we saw that with the Thanksgiving travel, it's only down by 10% over last year, which is really not that significant. I had hoped for numbers of down by 50 or 60%.
And the fact, Kate, that we are seeing so many, well, it's projected, as I said, people up to 2,000 deaths a day. What does that tell us about the ability of the country's healthcare infrastructure to cope with this spike?
Well, we are seeing that death rates are lower now, and there are a variety of different reasons for that. One is that more young people are catching COVID now, and they have lower mortality rates. But also, physicians and nurses have learned how to better take care of people with COVID, and also there's some new therapeutics, such as the monoclonal antibodies and the antivirals that are out now. And so I think that's part of what's making the difference. But as the numbers continue to spike, even though the mortality rates are low, I think that we will see, as you mentioned, over 2,000 deaths a day, and I think we will reach 300,000 deaths by the end of the year.
And Douglas Sloan, of course, all of this is taking place in a time of transition. I want to drill down a little further on Biden's picks. And as I said, there are people who are unhappy with this. The online newspaper, The Intercept, put it this way. They said the people that have been nominated already represent, quote, the forever war generation. The site says national security picks herald a return to hawkish diplomacy. An opportunity for reform is being squandered. That was from The Intercept. Politico, the political newspaper based here in Washington, also had a report saying that there are many people in the Democrat Party who are angry over the initial picks that Biden has made. Do they have a point?
I really don't think so. I don't think. I think they're looking for content. They're looking for news. That they're blowing this out of proportion a bit. Again, no one has served yet. No one has operated in those positions one day as of yet, and they are already hearing about it in the media. The media, in this case, is looking to highlight perhaps some of the divisions that may or may not exist in the party to that extent. Again, we are looking at a very experienced group of people that have been selected for these positions. And I think it's important that these aren't necessarily big names. We didn't see a lot of senators and governors with these selections like we did 4 years ago, say with Jeff Sessions for Attorney General or something like that.
Yeah.
Biden has been very shrewd. Most of these people you haven't heard of outside of maybe Janet Yellen or John Kerry. Biden has been very shrewd to pick people that are experienced in these positions to ensure that his people are diverse, and to know that these people will be able to get the job done and hit the ground running.
Right,
so,
but Douglas, I'm wondering about the kind of message that this sends, because there's been a survey that was done by Demand Progress, which said that most people who are surveyed, of course, are totally against Biden hiring people from either Wall Street or lobbyists. And if we look at some of the names here, Tony Blinken, he served as, who's going to be serving as Secretary of State. He founded West Exec Advisors, described as a business consultancy that worked with defense contractors. Avril Haines, former Westec principal, will serve as Biden's Director of National Intelligence. He's also considering nominating Westec co-founder Michelle Flournoy to serve as Secretary of Defense. Ron Klain was a lobbyist he's going to be the new Chief of Staff. He was a lobbyist for Fannie Mae. What kind of message does that send out there?
Well, speaking as a former government relations lobbyist myself, sometimes some of the people that you are going to put in these positions are going to have the experience of being a lobbyist. I've worked as a lobbyist. I've run campaigns. I've actually ran for office about 10 years ago. I have varied experience just like they have varied experience. The bottom line is that these people have experience in these fields. We're not seeing any more children or campaign donors that are being appointed to these positions, but people that actually have real experience. Janet Yellen has real experience in her field. Ms. Linda Greenhat has real experience for the ambassador of the United Nations. So, I mean, I think it's important that we have this experience, because Biden wants to send a message to the world that, the United States hopes to return to a position of prominence on the foreign stage, and that we will have experienced people and not necessarily, favorites, children, big Republican donors in these positions, but people that actually have experience in these fields that can get the job done and have the United States as their top priority while operating in these positions.
Adolfo Franco, the Washington Post is reporting that President Trump's post-presidency, as they call it, will be cluttered with potentially serious legal battles. He faces legal action in New York, in state courts there. Do you see the president facing charges when he leaves office? Could we even see family members facing charges? Is there a possibility that President Trump could end up behind bars?
Well, I certainly think that the agenda of the Democrat Party, despite their protestations for the last 4 years, that the president had an enemies list and so forth, are going to be very aggressive in trying to particularly Democratic attorney generals in different states, and even the federal government are going to do everything possible to make life very, very difficult for President Trump and his family. There's no question about that in my mind. Whether they will be successful remains to be seen. I don't know anything about the president's personal financial matters. I just know his politics and his policies. So that will be difficult to say what will happen, but I would, of course, not be at all surprised if that is not only stepped up in the next 4 years. And there will be a reason, and not just the vengeance and the revenge against Trump that will be part of it, but also to try to neutralize the Trump base and the Trump Republican Party. You know, this isn't horseshoe, so, you know, it looks like Joe Biden will be the next president. Nobody expected the election to be this close. Nobody expected Republicans to do so well across the country. So you have a president who received more votes than any other president in American history, and the Republican with the most presidents. That's a problem. This isn't 1984 with Mondale. This isn't 1980 with Jimmy Carter. This was not a repudiation of the Republican brand and of Trumpism. So I think there will be, to answer your question, a motivation to do that. How successful that will be, what type of I think reaction will be from the American people remains to be seen. I think it would be contrary to everything that the Vice President Biden has said about unity and bringing people together that would divide the country. The country has, you know, it's just over 50% of the people, popular vote, voted for Biden, and about 48% for Donald Trump. You put 100 people in a room, you divide 50, 51 versus 48. That's a pretty close call. Yeah. So I would think it would divide the country more if they pursue that, but I'm ventured to say that will be the case.
Katie Barlow, we were talking a moment about the COVID-19 pandemic and what it's done to the country, how it's affected so many people. It also had an enormous impact on the country's economy. But it seems that the United States Congress, at this crucial stage, has checked out at a time when millions of Americans are in serious need of help. What is the status of the kind of help they can expect from Congress? There's been lots of talk about a stimulus bill. We haven't seen anything happen on that end. What happens next? Why is it taking so long?
Well, I think it's taking so long because the system was built for it to take so long. But I think the Americans are crying out across the country for some help as we head into a winter with numbers that are spiking all over the country, and people that are in need of food and are still have lost their jobs despite the president touting a stock market that hit 30,000 today. A huge portion of the country is still losing their jobs. And so this is actually going to be an interesting political test for what happens under a Biden administration, and for Biden, who worked on the Hill for many years of his career, his sway with Democrats on the Hill and with leaders like Nancy Pelosi. It has been suggested in the press that Biden has told Democrats on the Hill, look, be willing to take a smaller package in order to reach a compromise with the Republicans in the Senate. And that's a refrain that we've heard from the Biden camp and from Biden himself on the campaign trail. He's going to be the guy that's able to compromise. He's been in D.C. He knows these people. They're willing to compromise with him, touting his relationship and friendship with John McCain as evidence of that. And so we'll see if it works. He's coming into Washington, D.C. as president of a very different country and a Congress that is deeply divided in a way that perhaps he hadn't seen when he was in the Senate. And so I think it will be certainly a test of his leadership and his ability to kind of coax members of his party to reach an agreement with senators, Republican senators. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Kate Tulenko, we are on the eve of the biggest holiday on the United States calendar, Thanksgiving. This is a time when it's the busiest travel period normally in the country. People are crisscrossing the country to be with family members on this holiday. But of course, we are now in the middle of a pandemic, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, the country's foremost infectious diseases expert, has warned people about the risks of traveling, about gathering with family members, many of them who are, of course, old and susceptible or vulnerable to the virus. Let's listen to what Dr. Fauci had to say.
One of the spots, if you want to call them, where you have a risk is seemingly innocent family, friends get together indoors. I mean, seems like the most natural thing. So that's the reason why when we tell people, consider the people that you want to get into your own family unit. Do you want to bring a large number of people with a big dinner party or a social event? And when you're eating and drinking, obviously you have to take your mask off. We know now that those are the kinds of situations that are leading to outbreaks.
So, Kate, as you said earlier on, people are fed up. It's fatigue. And despite that warning, we're still seeing and hearing that people are planning to be together on this holiday, on this Thanksgiving. We're seeing COVID-19 figures spike around the country. Could it get even worse because of this?
Yes, I think unfortunately it will. We know that 1 in 3 Americans plans to meet with people outside of their immediate household over Thanksgiving. So I think that 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, we'll see a severe spike. And I'm very concerned because a number of states have already run out of ICU beds. And they're looking at how they can transfer people from state to state and working on that. And I think also there's a little bit of overconfidence due to the announcement that we now have 3 possible vaccines for COVID. But we know that most people won't have access to the vaccine until probably the second quarter of next year. It's been announced that Pfizer will, the second week in December, ship around 6 million doses of COVID. And that will mainly go to health workers and some high-risk individuals, also some frontline workers like grocery store clerks. Some states have started publishing their COVID vaccine strategies. For example, Texas has released a 3-stage strategy. The first stage is health workers and frontline workers. The second stage is elderly people and high-risk people. Then the third stage is the general public.
Yeah. Douglas Sloan, I want to talk very quickly about the challenge that Joe Biden will face once he gets into office from COVID-19. He will, of course, have expert advisors. He's got the best laid plans, etc. But this pandemic, as we know, has become very politicized. And let's say he calls for a lockdown. I mean, he's going to expect opposition from those states that are controlled by Republicans, so-called red states. How much is that going to complicate his ability to solve this problem?
Well, it could create quite a problem. However, we're seeing nationwide spikes now, particularly in red states like North Dakota and South Dakota. And quite frankly, they are struggling under the strain of these outbreaks because they simply don't have the medical infrastructure to be able to withstand the onslaught of this disease. So I'm hopefully, people are beginning to understand just the severity of what we're dealing with regarding this pandemic. Hopefully, people will understand that now that we have a light at the end of the tunnel with this COVID vaccine, and that we may possibly need to do another lockdown just to try to get through to the other side before we can start disseminating the vaccine on a widespread basis. And hopefully we can get some cooperation out of some of these states. But it may very well be necessary, and you're right, we may face a lot of blowback because of that.
And that's where we have to leave it. We've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, I'm Anand Naidu. If you enjoy the thoughtful, engaged discussions you see on The Heat, you may also want to subscribe to our podcast. It's appropriately titled The Heat. Twice a week we take a deep dive on world headlines, talking to experts, journalists and others. It's a fresh, focused and intimate look at the issues that matter most. Whether it's the Hong Kong riots, the latest Middle East conflict or US politics, The Heat podcast gives the clear context needed to understand both what's going on and why. And what's best, we come to you. Whether you're at home or on the go, you can find the Heat podcast just about anywhere podcasts are found. Just search the Heat CGTN. Have a listen today and subscribe. Thanks.